Hey there, and welcome to the second part of our video series about how to make your real estate photography business explode in 2022. So in the first part, our two takeaway words were organization and consistency. At the end of the last video, I told you I was going to show you a trick to keep from having to modify your flash power off of full power. And we're going to get to that. But first, we're going to get to the theme of this video, which is to travel light. You see, this is all about growing your real estate business in 2022, and the way that you do that is to get more business and be able to handle it more efficiently. One of the ways that you do that is to travel light. So when I enter a house, this is what I have. I have a tripod, camera, flash trigger, my iPad that I tether to, a flash, just one, that I keep on my person in a pouch on a duty belt. This is the same kind of belt that like law enforcement uses and such. And I have a detail lens. So the lens that I have on my camera, my main wide angle lens, is the Sony G-Master 16-35 f2.8. The lens that I have for my detail lens is the Tamron 28-75. I always get this wrong because it's a weird, it's a weird lens. 28-75 f2.8. So the reason this is important is because I've done this different ways in the past. I have had lights on stands that I'll go ahead and set them up, and it looks like a forest in a house. I have had a case, like a Pelican 1510 case that I have all of my gear within, that I'll then wheel into the house, try to find some closet somewhere to stash it into. And that's just not the most efficient way to get into a house. Nowadays, I walk in like this, I work like this, and I walk out like this. I can get through a typical house. This is actually a bad example of that because this is a very large, very expensive builder home. I can get through a typical house, a 3 or 4 bedroom tract home, in about 45 minutes, doing all of my flash ambient composites, interior, exterior, single frame, stills, detail shots, and drone aerials, about 45 minutes or so. And then on to the next one, if I have the next one that day. So before we get into the flash compositing thing, I'm just gonna give a quick word about why I have a setup like this. So this is a 4-section tripod, and what you'll see is I only have the first section of legs extended. It is a center column tripod. And the reason that that's true is because I believe the best perspective to shoot interiors is that from a seated point of view. So if you were to imagine me sitting on a chair and the camera being about that high, that's what I think interiors look the best at. Now, that also has practical reasons for that. Typically, most homes, again, this one's a bad example of this, have 8-foot ceilings. So if you put the camera about 4 foot high, you are equidistant between those two planes. When you're shooting really wide, you have perspective distortion. So as to keep from seeing a sea of ceiling or a sea of flooring, you keep that lens between those two planes and also between the two horizontal planes if you can. And it just gives the most natural way to depict a small space when you're shooting it wider and trying to make it look larger. The other advantage to having a tripod set up like this, where you have only the first section extended and then you have a center column that I can quickly raise or lower depending if I want to get over a counter or under something, is this footprint becomes very small. And that is going to be crucial because you're often putting this camera in places where it's really tight. And if you have a tripod with a big long spread, yes, it's very stable, but it really limits you where you can put that tripod. So have the tripod set up like this. It is a little bit less stable inherently because the legs are only spread that much, but for workflow reasons, getting through that house quickly, making your business explode because now you're doing more and more per day, it is the best way to go. Along with that is the ability to tether wirelessly. I'm a huge believer in this because especially, this is where this house is a good example of this, especially in large homes like this. If I were to shoot this room behind me, okay, I'm gonna be flash popping in different places. I'm gonna set the camera up, say where it is right now that it's filming me from, and then I'm gonna wanna put a strobe over there, a strobe over there, and I'm gonna composite all that together. You can try to do that with a camera timer, but it's just not as good as being able to preview it on this. And this is actually one of the reasons that I continue to enjoy Sony cameras, because I think they have the best app built in for that. I don't have to mess with Cam Rangers and all the Imaging Edge app that Sony uses, especially with the Alpha 1 here, is a great combination to be able to wirelessly tether. So let's go ahead and let me show you around this house a little bit, and then we'll get into the flash thing. Okay, so here we are in this house. I've got a GoPro clipped to the bill of my hat, so sorry if it looks funky. And again, I've already shot this house, so I'm just going to show you what it is that I do in situations like this. So you'll see right here, we're in the master bedroom. Okay, so for this room, let me fire up my camera here, and I will also show you how easy this app is to connect. So just turn on the camera, just turned on the iPad, put the camera in Wi-Fi mode, and here it comes. Remote operation, okay. And with the Alpha 1 too, by the way, this has a great range. Now, I've filmed a screen with a GoPro again, and so I know that it blows this out, okay? So you're just gonna have to take my word for it, and I'll give you the final images that it looks better than what you're seeing right here on it. So I'm gonna be on manual, and I am going to set my focus at 4 meters. Let's see, we're gonna go with, we can go with about F7 or so. My flash trigger is still off. Right now I am going for, let's say right here is about what I like for my ambient exposure. So we're gonna go ahead and take that shot, okay? Now you'll see my windows are still way too blown out, right? So I am going to drop my shutter speed. That looks good. Probably still looks blown out on the iPad, but it looks good where I'm standing. Gonna turn on my trigger. My trigger is and will always be at full power. I'm going to make sure it connects to my strobe here because it's the first time I've used it today. Okay, so I'm at 1/60th f7.1. I'm going to take my strobe, point it up in the ceiling in this case, and boom, that is going to give me my exposure for the windows. Okay, now, let's keep this strobe at full power. And this is a 200 watt second Godox light, all right? And we'll go, say, to this bedroom. This bedroom is much smaller than the master bedroom that we just shot. So we are going to, instead of changing our flash power, okay, we're going to get our exposure by now changing aperture. Okay, so we're going to be at 1/60th, which is like what we were in the other room there, but we're going to change our aperture to f11. And what that's going to do is still give us a window exposure, but it's going to keep us from overpowering this room with strobe, because now that is cutting our strobe power too. So if I go like this, and then boom, there's my windows. Okay, I'll turn this off. I'll get a good ambient exposure. I like that about there, 1/5. And there you go. Those are the 2 layers I'm gonna use for that shot. Let's go one room even smaller. We'll go to this bathroom right here, okay? Now, I'm gonna use a 200 watt second light in a tiny little bathroom. Yes, I am. And I will give you my formula for this, okay? For small bathrooms, I will typically shoot at f/16, right? And we're gonna go at about 1/5. I'm gonna do f/18 for this bathroom because it's pretty light. Okay, and you see those lights up there in the top? That is going to be the brightest thing in this room. Almost forgot, I am going to focus at 1 meter. So when I'm focusing at 1 meter right here, it's about where that vase is. And so f/16, and this is where you need to know your depth of field charts and kind of, you know, and your focal length and your sensor size and all that, right? Full frame sensor, 1 meter to that vase, 16 millimeter, f/16, pretty much everything is going to be in focus. Now, by going to f/16, f/18, I am now effectively limiting my flash power. Okay, so I have the added benefit of not having to adjust my flash power. I'm still working quickly because I just shot this little bedroom. I'd already been through here in 2 other rooms if I wasn't explaining this. So let's see how it goes. All right, turn on my strobe, 1/5, and okay, boom. And that looks pretty good. Okay, that's gonna be my flash frame that's gonna control those lights. Okay, now I'm gonna get my ambient frame to blend. We're gonna go with 2 seconds, f/18. So, click. And there is my ambient frame. And I'll go ahead and show the final images for this. Okay, so a couple things about the gear we were using here and what we just learned. And this is another reason why, you know, you take a look at something like the A1 and most people think, wow, that's such a crazy expensive camera. But pertaining to what we just went over, it's a very relevant camera. And by that, I mean, this camera has ISO performance to where I am okay bumping up the ISO to get my flash power good and strong up to about 1000 ISO. And that's crazy. You know, I wouldn't be able to do that with the A7R4 that I was using before the A1. So why that's important is because this is a 200 watt second light. This is the Godox AD200. And this is actually the most common light that you will see out there for interiors. It is easy to carry around. It's very powerful. The batteries charge pretty quick and they last a long time. It's just a great light. It's about 2 to 2.5 times the strength of your typical speed light, really closer to a strobe than a speed light, but in a compact speed light type of form factor. And it's cheap. You know, they're about 300 bucks. The trigger on top of the camera is about 60 bucks. You're gonna wanna buy more than one trigger at a time because they do break. So, you know, all of that is good. It's a great alternative to like the pro photos of the world. So this, in a room like this, which is giant, if I'm shooting at ISO 100, it is not gonna light that much of this room. Okay, but if I have my camera go up to say ISO 640, this is now gonna become a much more powerful light. So what, you say? There are other cameras out there that have great ISO performance. I can do that with a XYZ whatever. But if you're to put this camera up to ISO 640 or any camera up to 640, you are then gonna have a problem with your windows. Your windows are gonna be blowing light right in, and you are not going to be able to increase your shutter speed enough on most cameras to be able to counteract that so you can get your flash power up to what you want it to get up to. That's where the Alpha 1 really shines, because this has a 1/400th of a second wireless flash sync speed without having to go to HSS, right? Which will deplete your power. So you can get clean images at ISO 640 this becomes a much more powerful light that you can still put in a pouch right on your belt, and you can compensate for the windows blowing out by increasing your shutter speed. If none of that made sense to you, that's okay. You know, this is, like I said in the beginning of this series, kind of meant for the journeyman real estate photographers. Get to know your exposure triangle, because everything that I just said has to do with that. Aperture and ISO value modify flash power. Ambient light is modified by aperture, shutter speed also, and ISO value. So, you know, so that's where the difference is controlling the window light versus flash power. So you get to know those kind of things in the exposure triangle and how they ping off each other, and it'll start to make a bit more sense to you. The other thing that I wanted to mention really quickly is the depth of field thing that I was talking about when we were in the bathroom. And that also is very important when it comes to in that bathroom. Okay, not only f16 to f18 is so advantageous for a shot like that, not only because you can leave your light on full power, but because at f16, f18, okay, the counter, which is going to be right next to the camera, it's the only shot in bathrooms like that, typically, right, is right from the door. You're going to have something in the extreme foreground. You're going to have the countertop right here. And then you're going to have, you know, the back wall of the bathroom, the toilet, shower, whatever's over there. Okay, so f16, it really kills two birds with one stone. It means that your flash is going to be the correct power to illuminate that space and keep the lighting, the overhead lighting, vanity lighting under control. And it is also going to mean that your foreground and your background elements are all going to remain in focus. And so, like I said, you know, to me, and kind of what I said in the first video too, a lot of these are formulas to me. So when I go to a bathroom like that, I know that I'm going to be f16, f18, and I'm going to focus at 1 meter out. When I go to a smaller of the two bedrooms that we did, I know I'm going to be f10, f11 or so, or else my flash is going to overpower the room. And I know my depth of field based upon my sensor. I know where this lens is best at. I know where diffraction starts to come in when you stop down too much. So I know f10, f11 is fine with my particular setup. And then with a big room like this, I know that this lens is best at about f5.6. Now my depth of field is getting pretty shallow at 5.6, even at 16 millimeter, 20 millimeter or so. So I want to stop down a little bit to 7.1 or so with a big room like this, because it's still going to be really, really sharp. The G Master is a fantastic lens. So anyway, I don't want this video to be too long. I hope you got something from this. The next video is going to be all about clients and how to get clients. And more importantly than how to get clients, the type of clients, the ones that you want and the ones you should probably avoid. So please like this video, subscribe to the channel if you got anything from this, and I'll see you next week. Take care.